Welcome to week 5 of our science fiction class. This week we're going to read the first half of N.K. Jemison's The Fifth Season. Next week we're obviously going to read the next part. But our way into this book is to talk about world building. But before we get on to world building, let me give you the reminder that C Contract students read only one complete novel in this class because that's how it rolls. So all of you have already read Brave New World and you're only reading 100 pages of this novel. I will have further instructions as the week progresses. Super busy B and A Contract students, welcome. You can adjust your contract to the C at this point. No harm, no foul. You just go to the choose your contract grade, and I think you just click it again and it'll pop you over. Or just let me know and I'll pop you over to the C contract if you find that at week 5 you're very, very busy. A reminder, B contract students read only 2 novels so in this class. And so that'd be Brave New World and The Fifth Season, and A contract students will be reading 3 entire novels, so that's a lot of reading. If it's giving you some pause, if you're thinking, wow, this is a long book, totally understandable. That's why the contract thing is set up here. Remember, this whole contract system is set up to raise completion rates across the campus. So, we're sort of robbing from Peter to pay Paul, and I would be Peter in that analogy because, yes, I would like everybody to read everything, but I want, the physics students to have more time in their majors or whatever. However it rolls out, sometimes it's just easier to adjust our commitments, and that's what the grading contract allows us to do. So I wanted everybody to just remember that and think about it. Shoot me a message in Moodle. You just click the little message thing, and I'm here to tell you that you are already experts at world building, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time going into all of it, but many of you guys are fans of 100 Things, and you know all about that world building that happens. Let's take a peek at how Huxley opens his novel, right? So Huxley, writing a science fiction novel in a world where not a bazillion science fiction novels have been written. His first concern, and I realize that I'm looking back, I'm sort of referencing a book that you guys have already read, but I will be getting to The Fifth Season. But we need to take a peek back at Brave New World, because watch what Huxley does. He immediately starts with the world building. He writes, a squat gray building of only 34 stories. So that looked perfectly normal to you. Probably our world, not actually a very big building. At that time, extraordinarily big building, 34 stories. Whoa. I continue. Over the main entrance, the words Central London Hatchery and Conditioning Center, and a shield, the world state's motto, community, identity, stability. Now he's blown minds. We're definitely in a different world. A different world is being built. We have a world state with its own motto. It means it's got that one world government thing has happened. Oh, darn it. Let me continue. The enormous room on the ground floor faced towards the north. Cold, for all the summer beyond the panes, for all the tropical heat of the room itself. A harsh, thin light glared through the windows, hungrily seeking some draped lay figure, some pallid shape of academic goose flesh, but finding only the glass and nickel and bleakly shining porcelain of a laboratory, familiar and unfamiliar to the audiences of his day, very unfamiliar to us who are still trying to, we're sort of disoriented in that. Wintriness responded to wintriness. The overalls of the workers were white, their hands gloved with a pale corpse-colored rubber. Okay, it's starting to come clear. Pretty like our world. The light was frozen, dead, a ghost. Beautiful writing here. I haven't spent a ton of time in this, but just lovely. Only from the yellow barrels of the microscopes did it borrow a certain rich living substance lying along the polished tubes like butter, streak after luscious streak in long recession down the work tables. Okay, not unlike our world. We know it isn't our world, but, it's different. And this, said the director, opening the door, is the fertilizing room. Definitely not terrifying. The fertilizing room. Unless we're at like a chicken hatchery, or I imagine, I still want to throw up. All right, bent over their instruments, 300 fertilizers were plunged as the director of hatcheries and conditioning entered the room. In the scarcely breathing silence, the absent-minded soliloquizing hum or whistle of absorbed concentration. A troop of newly arrived students, very young, pink and callow, followed nervously, rather abjectly at the director's heels. Very familiar to us, the relationship that students have to instructors, say. Each of them carried a notebook in which, whenever the great man spoke, he desperately scribbled. There's some of that early sexism. All of the students are male. Sad. All right, stay with me. Straight from the horse's mouth. It was a rare privilege. The DHC for Central London always made a point of personally conducting his new students round the various departments. Just to give you a general idea, he would explain to them, for of course some sort of general idea they must have if they were to do their work intelligently, though as little of one if they were to be good and happy members of society as possible. For particulars, as everyone knows, make for virtue and happiness. For particulars, as everyone knows, make for virtue and happiness. Generalities are intellectually necessary evils. Not philosophers, but fret sawyers and stamp collectors compose the backbone of society. Tomorrow, he would add, smiling at them with a slightly menacing geniality, you'll be settling down to serious work. You won't have time for generalities. Meanwhile, it was a privilege. Straight from the horse's mouth into the notebook, the boys scribbled like mad. Tall and rather thin but upright, the director advanced in the room. He had a long chin and prominent teeth, just covered. I'm going to skip a little bit so that we get right to this world building. I shall begin at the beginning, said the DHC, and the more zealous students recorded his intention for their notebooks. Begin at the beginning. Oh, dear. These, he waved his hands, are the incubators. And opening the insulated door, he showed them racks upon racks of numbered test tubes, the week's supply of ova. Kept, he explained, at blood heat, whereas the male gametes, and here he opened another door, they have to be kept at 35 instead of 37. Full blood heat sterilizes. Rams wrapped in thermogene beget no lambs. So he drops right into the world building and literally lays it out. He literally takes, so I guess what I'm talking about is how Huxley posits a group of students into the new world and then leads them around so that we readers can follow what this new world is like. Let me tell you, N.K. Jemisin does something completely different. Oh, hey, grab your book. You've got a book. Turn it to the prologue right here at the beginning. Different in the sense that Jemisin doesn't have a group of students. She doesn't have a doctor. She has a female protagonist, a mother in crisis, and a narrator who dives in and says, well, there's a heading under prologue. It says, you are here. And N.K. Jemisin is dealing with that same challenge, the world-building challenge, and perhaps the first and most, sort of dire feature of world-building for science fiction writers of science fiction, science fantasy, which is what this book is. So this book is such a fascinating book because it sort of bridges. It's on the border right between science fiction and science fantasy, and fantasy. Obviously, fantasy has a lot of world-building in it. Let's just take a peek here. Let's start with the end of the world, why don't we? Get it over with and move on to more interesting things. What a gripping opening that, who can imagine anything more interesting, or certainly more of interest to earthlings than the end of the world. First, a personal ending. There is a thing she will think over and over in the days to come as she imagines how her son died and tries to make sense of something so innately senseless. I'm introducing the book to you, and I want you to grab on. I want you to really enjoy this, and this is for everybody. This is obviously what material I'm going to discuss is in the first 100 pages right now. She will cover Uche's broken little body with a blanket, except his face, because he is afraid of the dark. She will sit beside it numb, and she will pay no attention to the world that is ending outside. All that's going to make sense to you. It all ends up. But instead of immediately trying to make sense the way that Huxley does, with an instructor, leading a group of students, as it were, N.K. Jemisin now has the freedom and liberty to be intriguing, to posit a scenario, a compelling emotional scenario where a mother has lost her child. She drops us right into that, and think of all the things that we don't know. We don't know anything. We don't know anything about the world. We don't know how the child died. We just know that it was senseless. We don't know who the mother is. We don't, it's all about what we don't know, interestingly. It's a fascinating sort of move at the beginning of this book. I will continue. The world has already ended within her, and neither ending is for the first time. She's old hat at this by now. What she thinks then and thereafter is, but he was free. And it is her bitter, weary self that answers this almost question every time her bewildered, shocked self manages to produce it. He wasn't. Not really, but now he will be. So more mystery. Why wasn't he free? This is kind of a question that we as citizens of the United States sort of have been, pushing to the corners, this question of the founding of our nation based on slavery. Now, those kinds of themes are present. Themes of slavery, themes of oppression are, I'm not going to say at the core of this book, but they are the wallpaper for sure. Let me continue. But you need context. Let's try the ending again. Writ continentally. Here is land. It is ordinary as lands go. Mountains and plateaus and canyons and river deltas, the usual, ordinary. Except for its size and its dynamism, it moves a lot, this land. Like an old man lying restlessly abed, it heaves and sighs, puckers and farts, yawns and swallows. Naturally, this land's people have named it the stillness. It is a land of quiet and bitter irony. Now, there's so many references to the stillness in this book, and the stillness actually comes to represent something else. And I don't want to give everything away. That's not the way that I teach. I don't here's the point as a book. My style of teaching is that you are on an adventure of wonderment. Wonderment. So feel wonderment, but there's a lot that I can say about world building before we get off into the rest of the week's work. So allow me to go do that with us. So these are some world building elements, and I know that most of you, this is not going to be world shattering to a great many of you, but anything that has to do with how people live or organize their lives is world building. So power sources, language, religion, art, folklore, dress, deities, architecture, artifacts, anything that has to do with how information is passed, especially how it's passed, obviously, and also um, how it's passed from one generation to another. And that turns out to be incredibly important in the fifth season because it's an incredibly old civilization. So, age of the civilization would be there. Seasons, technology, food. These are all things that would be different when you go to consider a different world. Your world building, holidays, systems of government, gender roles. What's funny? Think about it. Even culture to culture, what's funny changes on our planet in our world. Imagine that with a completely different world. What's tragic? Who has power? Wildlife. There is in the fifth season a tremendous piece of wildlife, very exciting, singing with a creature. Really, really fantastic. So I'll just continue. I know that you guys are getting this, but I just wanted to go over these. Who is oppressed? Who is liberated? What constitutes a family? Gender, trade, economics, landscape, justice, honor. So all these things that are kind of, central to what it means to be a human being end up playing a great role in world building. Before I get you into this, I need to sort of make clear at least one thing about the text. There is the use of the second person. It is a very brave use in a book like this. And again, I'm trying not to spoil. I will just sort of explain that there are sort of three separate focus characters, and one of those focus characters, when we're in those sections, is referred to as you. And it is ingenious, and it is a way to help you, me, you, readers, position ourselves inside there. And it draws us into this world. Maybe who do I connect with most in Brave New World? Is it John Savage? No. Is it Bernard? God, no. Is it Helmholtz? There's, so that's kind of it was difficult, and I enjoyed your guys' responses to those questions. It's very difficult to kind of find a character that you could really, sort of ride on its shoulder the way that, when I was a kid, I watched Star Wars, yes, in the movie theater. Can you believe it? And of course, there I was with Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker. I think we all were. Maybe the tougher, older kids were more like Han Solo, or young women were more like, Princess Leia. Or I think we all kind of gravitate to a character that we root for and that draws us along. And one of the techniques that this book includes that gets us all into it is that you. And of course, N.K. Jemisin, she has a message that she wants to share. And in fact, before you even start reading this week, I have a video that you'll need to watch, an interview with N.K. Jemisin as she discusses more about world building, a brilliant writer. For those of you that are interested in writing, the video that I'm going to share with you is a great way to sort of start really thinking about your own work as you listen to N.K. Jemisin discuss world building. But what she's talking about is the fifth season. So for those of us who are just studying it as a piece of literature, it's also a nourishing video. And I mentioned that by way of sort of saying she's very deliberate with that you pronoun that gets used there. And there are big surprises for everyone in this book. Again, I try not to surprise. I don't want to let her spoil a few. She doesn't spoil anything big, but in her interview, she said more than I do. Because this is true even of my Shakespeare courses. I just love to watch worlds get built, plots get carried out, characters manifest their goals, uh, and then I like to do discussion or that, but I don't like to have it. I certainly, as a student, didn't like to have it lectured at me. I'd rather be surprised. Um, so I hope you will enjoy being surprised. I hope you enjoy this journey into the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin, and just keep clicking links this week, and the assignments are waiting for you there.